New York City. The city of New York, usually called either New York City, NYC, or simply New York, NY, is the most populous city in the United States. With an estimated 2018 population of 8,398,748 distributed over a land area of about 302.6 square miles, 784 square kilometers, New York is also the most densely populated major city in the United States. Located at the southern tip of the state of New York, the city is the center of the New York metropolitan area, the largest metropolitan area in the world by urban landmass and one of the world's most populous megacities, with an estimated 19,979,477 people in its 2018 metropolitan statistical area and 22,679,948 residents in its combined statistical area. A global power city, New York City has been described as the cultural, financial, and media capital of the world, and exerts a significant impact upon commerce, entertainment, research, technology, education, politics, tourism, art, fashion, and sports. The city's fast pace has inspired the term New York Minute. Home to the headquarters of the United Nations, New York is an important center for international diplomacy. Situated on one of the world's largest national harbors, New York City consists of 5 boroughs, each of which is a separate county of the state of New York. The 5 boroughs, Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, the Bronx, and Staten Island, were consolidated into a single city in 1898. The city and its metropolitan area constitute the premier gateway for legal immigration to the United States. As many as 800 languages are spoken in New York, making it the most linguistically diverse city in the world. New York City is home to more than 3.2 million residents born outside the United States, the largest foreign-born population of any city in the world. As of 2019, the New York metropolitan area is estimated to produce a gross metropolitan product, GMP, of $1.9 trillion. If Greater New York City were a sovereign state, it would have the 12th highest GDP in the world. New York is home to the highest number of millionaires of any city in the world. New York City traces its origins to a trading post founded by colonists from the Dutch Republic in 1624 on Lower Manhattan. The post was named New Amsterdam in 1626. The city and its surroundings came under English control in 1664 and were renamed New York after King Charles II of England granted the lands to his brother, the Duke of York. New York was the capital of the United States from 1785 until 1790, and has been the largest U.S. city since 1790. The Statue of Liberty greeted millions of immigrants as they came to the U.S. by ship in the late 19th and early 20th centuries and is an international symbol of the U.S. and its ideals of liberty and peace. In the 21st century, New York has emerged as a global node of creativity and entrepreneurship, social tolerance, and environmental sustainability, and as a symbol of freedom and cultural diversity. In 2019, New York was voted the greatest city in the world per a survey of over 30,000 people from 48 cities worldwide, citing its cultural diversity. Many districts and landmarks in New York City are well known, including 3 of the world's 10 most visited tourist attractions in 2013, a record 62.8 million tourists visited in 2017. Several sources have ranked New York the most photographed city in the world. Times Square, iconic as the world's heart and crossroads, is the brightly illuminated hub of the Broadway Theater District, one of the world's busiest pedestrian intersections, and a major center of the world's entertainment industry. The names of many of the city's landmarks, skyscrapers, and parks are known internationally. Manhattan's real estate market is among the most expensive in the world. New York is home to the largest ethnic Chinese population outside of Asia, with multiple signature Chinatowns across the city. Providing continuous 24/7 service, the New York City subway is the largest single-operator rapid transit system worldwide, with 472 rail stations. The city has over 120 colleges and universities, including Columbia University, New York University, and Rockefeller University, ranked among the top universities in the world. Anchored by Wall Street in the financial district of Lower Manhattan, New York has been called both the most economically powerful city and world's leading financial center, and is home to the world's two largest stock exchanges by total market capitalization, the New York Stock Exchange and Nasdaq. History. Etymology. In 1664, the city was named in honor of the Duke of York, who would become King James II of England. James's older brother, King Charles II, had appointed the Duke proprietor of the former territory of New Netherland, including the city of New Amsterdam, which England had recently seized from the Dutch. Early history. During the Wisconsin glaciation, 75,000 to 11,000 years ago, the New York City region was situated at the edge of a large ice sheet over 2,000 feet, 610 meters, in depth. The erosive forward movement of the ice, and its subsequent retreat, contributed to the separation of what is now Long Island and Staten Island. That action also left bedrock at a relatively shallow depth, providing a solid foundation for most of Manhattan's skyscrapers. In the pre-colonial era, the area of present-day New York City was inhabited by Algonquian Native Americans, including the Lenape, whose homeland, known as Lenapehoking, included Staten Island, the western portion of Long Island, including the area that would become Brooklyn and Queens, Manhattan, the Bronx, and the lower Hudson Valley. The first documented visit into New York Harbor by a European was in 1524 by Giovanni de Verzano, a Florentine explorer in the service of the French crown. He claimed the area for France and named it Nouvelle Angoulême, New Angoulême. A Spanish expedition led by Captain Estevão Gomes, a Portuguese sailing for Emperor Charles V, arrived in New York Harbor in January 1525 and charted the mouth of the Hudson River, which he named Rio de San Antonio, St. Anthony's River. The Padron Reel of 1527, the first scientific map to show the east coast of North America continuously, was informed by Gomez' expedition and labeled the northeastern United States as Tierra de Esteban Gomez in his honor. In 1609, the English explorer Henry Hudson rediscovered the New York Harbor while searching for the Northwest Passage to the Orient for the Dutch East India Company. He proceeded to sail up what the Dutch would name the North River, now the Hudson River, named first by Hudson as the Mauritius after Maurice, Prince of Orange. Hudson's first mate described the harbor as a very good harbor for all winds and the river as a mile broad and full of fish. Hudson sailed roughly 150 miles, 240 kilometers, north, past the site of the present-day New York State capital city of Albany, in the belief that it might be an oceanic tributary before the river became too shallow to continue. He made a 10-day exploration of the area and claimed the region for the Dutch East India Company. In 1614, the area between Cape Cod and Delaware Bay was claimed by the Netherlands and called Nieuw Nederland, New Netherland. The first non-Native American inhabitant of what would eventually become New York City was Juan Rodriguez, transliterated to Dutch as Jan Rodrigues, a merchant from Santo Domingo. Born in Santo Domingo of Portuguese and African descent, he arrived in Manhattan during the winter of 1613-14, trapping for pelts and trading with the local population as a representative of the Dutch. Broadway, from 159th Street to 218th Street in Upper Manhattan, is named Juan Rodriguez Way in his honor. Dutch rule. A permanent European presence in New Netherland began in 1624, making New York the 12th oldest continuously occupied European established settlement in the continental United States, with the founding of a Dutch fur trading settlement on Governor's Island. In 1625, construction was started on a citadel and Fort Amsterdam, later called Nieuw Amsterdam, New Amsterdam, on present-day Manhattan Island. The colony of New Amsterdam was centered at the site which would eventually become Lower Manhattan. It extended from the lower tip of Manhattan to modern-day Wall Street, where a 12-foot wooden stockade was built in 1653 to protect against Native American and British raids. In 1626, the Dutch colonial director General Peter Minuit, acting as charged by the Dutch West India Company, purchased the island of Manhattan from the Canarsie, a small Lenape band, for the value of 60 guilders, about $900 in 2018. A disproved legend claims that Manhattan was purchased for $24 worth of glass beads. Following the purchase, New Amsterdam grew slowly. To attract settlers, the Dutch instituted the patroon system in 1628, whereby wealthy Dutchmen, patroons, or patrons, who brought 50 colonists to New Netherland would be awarded swathes of land, along with local political autonomy and rights to participate in the lucrative fur trade. This program had little success. Since 1621, the Dutch West India Company had operated as a monopoly in New Netherland, on authority granted by the Dutch States General. In 1639 to 1640, in an effort to bolster economic growth, the Dutch West India Company relinquished its monopoly over the fur trade, leading to growth in the production and trade of food, timber, tobacco, and slaves, particularly with the Dutch West Indies. In 1647, Peter Stuyvesant began his tenure as the last Director General of New Netherland. During his tenure, the population of New Netherland grew from 2,000 to 8,000. Stuyvesant has been credited with improving law and order in the colony, however, he also earned a reputation as a despotic leader. He instituted regulations on liquor sales, attempted to assert control over the Dutch Reformed Church, and blocked other religious groups, including Quakers, Jews, and Lutherans, from establishing houses of worship. The Dutch West India Company would eventually attempt to ease tensions between Stuyvesant and residents of New Amsterdam. English rule. In 1664, unable to summon any significant resistance, Stuyvesant surrendered New Amsterdam to English troops, led by Colonel Richard Nichols, without bloodshed. The terms of the surrender permitted Dutch residents to remain in the colony and allowed for religious freedom. The English promptly renamed the fledgling city New York after the Duke of York, the future King James II of England. The transfer was confirmed in 1667 by the Treaty of Breda, which concluded the Second Anglo-Dutch War. On August 24, 1673, during the Third Anglo-Dutch War, Dutch Captain Anthony Colve seized the colony of New York from England at the behest of Cornwallis Evertson the youngest and rechristened it New Orange after William III, the Prince of Orange. The Dutch would soon return the island to England under the Treaty of Westminster of November 1674. Several intertribal wars among the Native Americans and some epidemics brought on by contact with the Europeans caused sizable population losses for the Lenape between the years 1660 and 1670. By 1700, the Lenape population had diminished to 200. New York experienced several yellow fever epidemics in the 18th century, losing 10% of its population to the disease in 1702 alone. New York grew in importance as a trading port while under British rule in the early 1700s. It also became a center of slavery, with 42% of households holding slaves by 1730, the highest percentage outside Charleston, South Carolina. Most slaveholders held a few or several domestic slaves, but others hired them out to work at labor. Slavery became integrally tied to New York's economy through the labor of slaves throughout the port, and the banks and shipping tied to the American South. Discovery of the African burying ground in the 1990s, during construction of a new federal courthouse near Foley Square, revealed that tens of thousands of Africans had been buried in the area in the colonial years. The 1735 trial and acquittal in Manhattan of John Peter Zenger, who had been accused of seditious libel after criticizing colonial Governor William Cosby, helped to establish the freedom of the press in North America. In 1754, Columbia University was founded under charter by King George II as King's College in Lower Manhattan. American Revolution. The Stamp Act Congress met in New York in October 1765, as the Sons of Liberty, organized in the city, skirmished over the next 10 years with British troops stationed there. The Battle of Long Island, the largest battle of the American Revolutionary War, was fought in August 1776 within the modern-day borough of Brooklyn. After the battle, in which the Americans were defeated, the British made the city their military and political base of operations in North America. The city was a haven for Loyalist refugees and escaped slaves who joined the British lines for freedom newly promised by the Crown for all fighters. As many as 10,000 escaped slaves crowded into the city during the British occupation. When the British forces evacuated at the close of the war in 1783, they transported 3,000 freedmen for resettlement in Nova Scotia. They resettled other freedmen in England and the Caribbean. The only attempt at a peaceful solution to the war took place at the Conference House on Staten Island between American delegates, including Benjamin Franklin, and British General Lord Howe on September 11, 1776. Shortly after the British occupation began, the Great Fire of New York occurred, a large conflagration on the west side of Lower Manhattan, which destroyed about a quarter of the buildings in the city, including Trinity Church. In 1785, the Assembly of the Congress of the Confederation made New York City the national capital shortly after the war. New York was the last capital of the U.S. under the Articles of Confederation and the first capital under the Constitution of the United States. In 1789, the first President of the United States, George Washington, was inaugurated. The first United States Congress and the Supreme Court of the United States each assembled for the first time, and the United States Bill of Rights was drafted, all at Federal Hall on Wall Street. By 1790, New York had surpassed Philadelphia to become the largest city in the United States, but by the end of that year, pursuant to the Residence Act, the national capital was moved to Philadelphia. 19th century. Under New York State's Gradual Abolition Act of 1799, children of slave mothers were to be eventually liberated but to be held in indentured servitude until their mid to late 20s. Together with slaves freed by their masters after the Revolutionary War and escaped slaves, a significant free black population gradually developed in Manhattan. Under such influential United States founders as Alexander Hamilton and John Jay, the New York Manumission Society worked for abolition and established the African Free School to educate black children. It was not until 1827 that slavery was completely abolished in the state, and free blacks struggled afterward with discrimination. New York interracial abolitionist activism continued. Among its leaders were graduates of the African Free School. The city's black population reached more than 16,000 in 1840. In the 19th century, the city was transformed by development relating to its status as a national and international trading center, as well as by European immigration. The city adopted the Commissioner's Plan of 1811, which expanded the city's street grid to encompass almost all of Manhattan. The 1825 completion of the Erie Canal through central New York connected the Atlantic port to the agricultural markets and commodities of the North American interior via the Hudson River and the Great Lakes. Local politics became dominated by Tammany Hall, a political machine supported by Irish and German immigrants. Several prominent American literary figures lived in New York during the 1830s and 1840s, including William Cullen Bryant, Washington Irving, Herman Melville, Rufus Wilmot Griswold, John Keyes, Nathaniel Parker Willis, and Edgar Allan Poe. Public-minded members of the contemporaneous business elite lobbied for the establishment of Central Park, which in 1857 became the first landscaped park in an American city. The Great Irish Famine brought a large influx of Irish immigrants, of whom over 200,000 were living in New York by 1860, upwards of a quarter of the city's population. There was also extensive immigration from the German provinces, where revolutions had disrupted societies, and Germans comprised another 25% of New York's population by 1860. Democratic Party candidates were consistently elected to local office, increasing the city's ties to the South and its dominant party. In 1861, Mayor Fernando Wood called upon the aldermen to declare independence from Albany and the United States after the South seceded, but his proposal was not acted on. Anger at new military conscription laws during the American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, which spared wealthier men who could afford to pay a $300, equivalent to $6,105 in 2018, commutation fee to hire a substitute, led to the draft riots of 1863, whose most visible participants were ethnic Irish working class. The situation deteriorated into attacks on New York's elite, followed by attacks on Black New Yorkers and their property after fierce competition for a decade between Irish immigrants and Black people for work. Rioters burned the Colored Orphan Asylum to the ground, with more than 200 children escaping harm due to efforts of the New York Police Department, which was mainly made up of Irish immigrants. At least 120 people were killed. 11 Black men were lynched over 5 days, and the riots forced hundreds of Blacks to flee the city for Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and New Jersey. The Black population in Manhattan fell below 10,000 by 1865, which it had last been in 1820. The white working class had established dominance. Violence by longshoremen against Black men was especially fierce in the docks area. It was one of the worst incidents of civil unrest in American history. Modern history. In 1898, the modern city of New York was formed with the consolidation of Brooklyn, until then a separate city, the County of New York, which then included parts of the Bronx, the County of Richmond, and the western portion of the County of Queens. The opening of the subway in 1904, first built as separate private systems, helped bind the new city together. Throughout the first half of the 20th century, the city became a world center for industry, commerce, and communication. In 1904, the steamship General Slocum caught fire in the East River, killing 1,021 people on board. In 1911, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, the city's worst industrial disaster, took the lives of 146 garment workers and spurred the growth of the International Ladies Garment Workers Union and major improvements in factory safety standards. New York's non-white population was 36,620 in 1890. New York City was a prime destination in the early 20th century for African Americans during the Great Migration from the American South, and by 1916, New York City had become home to the largest urban African diaspora in North America. The Harlem Renaissance of literary and cultural life flourished during the era of Prohibition. The larger economic boom generated construction of skyscrapers competing in height and creating an identifiable skyline. New York became the most populous urbanized area in the world in the early 1920s, overtaking London. The metropolitan area surpassed the 10 million mark in the early 1930s, becoming the first megacity in human history. The difficult years of the Great Depression saw the election of reformer Fiorello LaGuardia as mayor and the fall of Tammany Hall after 80 years of political dominance. Returning World War II veterans created a post-war economic boom and the development of large housing tracts in eastern Queens and Nassau County as well as similar suburban areas in New Jersey. New York emerged from the war unscathed as the leading city of the world, with Wall Street leading America's place as the world's dominant economic power. The United Nations headquarters was completed in 1952, solidifying New York's global geopolitical influence, and the rise of abstract expressionism in the city precipitated New York's displacement of Paris as the center of the art world. The Stonewall riots were a series of spontaneous, violent demonstrations by members of the gay community against a police raid that took place in the early morning hours of June 28, 1969, at the Stonewall Inn in the Greenwich Village neighborhood of Lower Manhattan. They are widely considered to constitute the single most important event leading to the gay liberation movement and the modern fight for LGBT rights. Wayne Ardines, author of the Encyclopedia of Homosexuality, wrote that drag queens were the only transgender folks around during the June 1969 Stonewall riots. None of them in fact made a major contribution to the movement. Others say the transgender community in New York City played a significant role in fighting for LGBT equality during the period of the Stonewall riots and thereafter. In the 1970s, job losses due to industrial restructuring caused New York City to suffer from economic problems and rising crime rates. While a resurgence in the financial industry greatly improved the city's economic health in the 1980s, New York's crime rate continued to increase through that decade and into the beginning of the 1990s. By the mid-1990s, crime rates started to drop dramatically due to revised police strategies, improving economic opportunities, gentrification, and new residents, both American transplants and new immigrants from Asia and Latin America. Important new sectors, such as Silicon Alley, emerged in the city's economy. New York's population reached all-time highs in the 2000 census and then again in the 2010 census. New York suffered the bulk of the economic damage and largest loss of human life in the aftermath of the September 11, 2001 attacks. 2 of the 4 airliners hijacked that day were flown into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, destroying them and killing 2,192 civilians, 343 firefighters, and 71 law enforcement officers. The North Tower became the tallest building ever to be destroyed anywhere then or subsequently. The rebuilding of the area has created a new One World Trade Center, and a 9/11 memorial and museum along with other new buildings and infrastructure. The World Trade Center Path Station, which had opened on July 19, 1909 as the Hudson Terminal, was also destroyed in the attack. A temporary station was built and opened on November 23, 2003. An 800,000 square foot, 74,000 square meters, permanent trail station designed by Santiago Calatrava, the World Trade Center Transportation Hub, the city's third largest hub, was completed in 2016. The new One World Trade Center is the tallest skyscraper in the Western Hemisphere and the 6th tallest building in the world by pinnacle height, with its spire reaching a symbolic 1,776 feet, 541.3 meters, in reference to the year of U.S. independence. The Occupy Wall Street protests in Zuccotti Park in the financial district of Lower Manhattan began on September 17, 2011, receiving global attention and popularizing the Occupy movement against social and economic inequality worldwide. Geography. New York City is situated in the northeastern United States, in southeastern New York State, approximately halfway between Washington, D.C., and Boston. The location at the mouth of the Hudson River, which feeds into a naturally sheltered harbor and then into the Atlantic Ocean, has helped the city grow in significance as a trading port. Most of New York City is built on the 3 islands of Long Island, Manhattan, and Staten Island. The Hudson River flows through the Hudson Valley into New York Bay. Between New York City and Troy, New York, the river is an estuary. The Hudson River separates the city from the U.S. state of New Jersey. The East River, a tidal strait, flows from Long Island Sound and separates the Bronx and Manhattan from Long Island. The Harlem River, another tidal strait between the East and Hudson Rivers, separates most of Manhattan from the Bronx. The Bronx River, which flows through the Bronx and Westchester County, is the only entirely freshwater river in the city. The city's land has been altered substantially by human intervention, with considerable land reclamation along the waterfronts since Dutch colonial times. Reclamation is most prominent in Lower Manhattan, with developments such as Battery Park City in the 1970s and 1980s. Some of the natural relief in topography has been evened out, especially in Manhattan. The city's total area is 468.484 square miles, 213.37 square kilometers, including 302.643 square miles, 783.84 square kilometers, of land and 165.841 square miles, 429.53 square kilometers, of this is water. The highest point in the city is Todd Hill on Staten Island, which, at 409.8 feet, 124.9 meters, above sea level, is the highest point on the eastern seaboard south of Maine. The summit of the ridge is mostly covered in woodlands as part of the Staten Island Greenbelt. Boroughs. New York City is often referred to collectively as the 5 boroughs, and in turn, there are hundreds of distinct neighborhoods throughout the boroughs, many with a definable history and character to call their own. If the boroughs were each independent cities, 4 of the boroughs, Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, and the Bronx, would be among the 10 most populous cities in the United States. Staten Island would be ranked 37th. These same boroughs are coterminous with the 4 most densely populated counties in the United States: New York, Manhattan, Kings, Brooklyn, Bronx, and Queens. Manhattan, New York County, is the geographically smallest and most densely populated borough. is home to Central Park and most of the city's skyscrapers, and may be locally known simply as the city. Manhattan's, New York County's, population density of 72,033 people per square mile, 27,812 per square kilometer, in 2015 makes it the highest of any county in the United States and higher than the density of any individual American city. Manhattan is the cultural, administrative, and financial center of New York City and contains the headquarters of many major multinational corporations, the United Nations headquarters, Wall Street, and a number of important universities. Manhattan is often described as the financial and cultural center of the world. Most of the borough is situated on Manhattan Island, at the mouth of the Hudson River. Several small islands also compose part of the borough of Manhattan, including Randall's Island, Ward's Island, and Roosevelt Island in the East River, and Governor's Island and Liberty Island to the south in New York Harbor. Manhattan Island is loosely divided into Lower, Midtown, and Uptown regions. Uptown Manhattan is divided by Central Park into the Upper East Side and the Upper West Side, and above the park is Harlem. The borough also includes a small neighborhood on the United States mainland, called Marble Hill, which is contiguous with the Bronx. New York City's remaining 4 boroughs are collectively referred to as the outer boroughs. Brooklyn, Kings County, on the western tip of Long Island, is the city's most populous borough. Brooklyn is known for its cultural, social, and ethnic diversity, an independent art scene, distinct neighborhoods, and a distinctive architectural heritage. Downtown Brooklyn is the largest central core neighborhood in the outer boroughs. The borough has a long beachfront shoreline including Coney Island, established in the 1870s as one of the earliest amusement grounds in the country. Marine Park and Prospect Park are the 2 largest parks in Brooklyn. Since 2010, Brooklyn has evolved into a thriving hub of entrepreneurship and high-technology startup firms, and of postmodern art and design. Queens County, on Long Island north and east of Brooklyn, is geographically the largest borough, the most ethnically diverse county in the United States, and the most ethnically diverse urban area in the world. Historically a collection of small towns and villages founded by the Dutch, the borough has since developed both commercial and residential prominence. Downtown Flushing has become one of the busiest central core neighborhoods in the outer boroughs. Queens is the site of Citi Field, the baseball stadium of the New York Mets, and hosts the annual U.S. Open tennis tournament at Flushing Meadows Corona Park. Additionally, 2 of the 3 busiest airports serving the New York metropolitan area, John F. Kennedy International Airport and LaGuardia Airport, are located in Queens. The third is Newark Liberty International Airport in Newark, New Jersey. The Bronx County, is New York City's northernmost borough and the only New York City borough with a majority of it a part of the mainland United States. It is the location of Yankee Stadium, the baseball park of the New York Yankees, and home to the largest cooperatively owned housing complex in the United States, Co-op City. It is also home to the Bronx Zoo, the world's largest metropolitan zoo, which spans 265 acres, 1.07 square kilometers, and houses over 6,000 animals. The Bronx is also the birthplace of rap and hip-hop culture. Pelham Bay Park is the largest park in New York City, at 2,772 acres, 1,122 hectares. Staten Island, Richmond County, is the most suburban in character of the 5 boroughs. Staten Island is connected to Brooklyn by the Verrazano Narrows Bridge, and to Manhattan by way of the free Staten Island Ferry, a daily commuter ferry which provides unobstructed views of the Statue of Liberty, Ellis Island, and Lower Manhattan. In central Staten Island, the Staten Island Greenbelt spans approximately 2,500 acres, 10 square kilometers, including 28 miles, 45 kilometers, of walking trails and one of the last undisturbed forests in the city. Designated in 1984 to protect the island's natural lands, the Greenbelt comprises 7 city parks. Architecture. New York has architecturally noteworthy buildings in a wide range of styles and from distinct time periods, from the Saltbox-style Peter Clason Wyckoff House in Brooklyn, the oldest section of which dates to 1656, to the modern One World Trade Center, the skyscraper at Ground Zero in Lower Manhattan and the most expensive office tower in the world by construction cost. Manhattan's skyline, with its many skyscrapers, is universally recognized, and the city has been home to several of the tallest buildings in the world. As of 2019, New York City had 6,455 high-rise buildings, the third most in world after Hong Kong and Seoul. Of these, as of 2011, 550 completed structures were at least 330 feet, 100 meters, high, the second most in the world after Hong Kong, with over 50 completed skyscrapers taller than 656 feet, 200 meters. These include the Woolworth Building, an early example of Gothic Revival architecture in skyscraper design, built with massively scaled Gothic detailing, completed in 1913. For 17 years it was the world's tallest building. The 1916 zoning resolution required setbacks in new buildings and restricted towers to a percentage of the lot size, to allow sunlight to reach the streets below. The Art Deco style of the Chrysler Building, 1930, and Empire State Building, 1931, with their tapered tops and steel spires, reflected the zoning requirements. The buildings have distinctive ornamentation, such as the eagles at the corners of the 61st floor on the Chrysler Building, and are considered some of the finest examples of the Art Deco style. A highly influential example of the international style in the United States is the Seagram Building, 1957, distinctive for its facade using visible bronze-toned I-beams to evoke the building's structure. The Condé Nast Building, 2000, is a prominent example of green design in American skyscrapers and has received an award from the American Institute of Architects and AI in New York State for its design. The character of New York's large residential districts is often defined by the elegant brownstone row houses and townhouses and shabby tenements that were built during a period of rapid expansion from 1870 to 1930. In contrast, New York City also has neighborhoods that are less densely populated and feature freestanding dwellings. In neighborhoods such as Riverdale, in the Bronx, Demas Park, in Brooklyn, and Douglaston, in Queens, large single-family homes are common in various architectural styles such as Tudor Revival and Victorian. Stone and brick became the city's building materials of choice after the construction of wood frame houses was limited in the aftermath of the Great Fire of 1835. A distinctive feature of many of the city's buildings is the roof-mounted wooden water tower. In the 1800s, the city required their installation on buildings higher than 6 stories to prevent the need for excessively high water pressures at lower elevations, which could break municipal water pipes. Garden apartments became popular during the 1920s in outlying areas, such as Jackson Heights. According to the United States Geological Survey, an updated analysis of seismic hazard in July 2014 revealed a slightly lower hazard for tall buildings in New York City than previously assessed. Scientists estimated this lessened risk based upon a lower likelihood than previously thought of slow shaking near the city, which would be more likely to cause damage to taller structures from an earthquake in the vicinity of the city. Climate. Under the Köppen climate classification, using the 0 degrees Celsius, 32 degrees Fahrenheit, isotherm, New York City features a humid subtropical climate, and is thus the northernmost major city on the North American continent with this categorization. The suburbs to the immediate north and west lie in the transitional zone between humid subtropical and humid continental climates. For the true WAERTA classification, it is defined as an oceanic climate, due. Annually, the city averages 234 days with at least some sunshine. The city lies in the USDA 7B plant hardiness zone. Winters are cold and damp, and prevailing wind patterns that blow sea breezes offshore temper the moderating effects of the Atlantic Ocean, yet the Atlantic and the partial shielding from colder air by the Appalachian Mountains keep the city warmer in the winter than inland North American cities at similar or lesser latitudes such as Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and Indianapolis. The daily mean temperature in January, the area's coldest month, is 32.6 degrees Fahrenheit, 0.3 degrees Celsius, Temperatures usually drop to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 12 degrees Celsius, several times per winter, and reach 60 degrees Fahrenheit, 16 degrees Celsius, several days in the coldest winter month. Spring and autumn are unpredictable and can range from chilly to warm, although they are usually mild with low humidity. Summers are typically warm to hot and humid, with a daily mean temperature of 76.5 degrees Fahrenheit, 24.7 degrees Celsius, in July. Nighttime conditions are often exacerbated by the urban heat island phenomenon, while daytime temperatures exceed 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 32 degrees Celsius, on average of 17 days each summer, and in some years exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 38 degrees Celsius, although the last time this happened was July 23, 2011. Extreme temperatures have ranged from minus 15 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 26 degrees Celsius, recorded on February 9, 1934, up to 106 degrees Fahrenheit, 41 degrees Celsius, on July 9, 1936. The coldest recorded wind chill was minus 37 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 38 degrees Celsius, on the same day as the all-time record low. The record cold daily maximum was 2 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 17 degrees Celsius, on December 30, 1917, while, conversely, the record warm daily minimum was 84 degrees Fahrenheit, 29 degrees Celsius, last recorded on July 22, 2011. The average water temperature of the nearby Atlantic Ocean ranges from 39.7 degrees Fahrenheit, 4.3 degrees Celsius, in February to 74.1 degrees Fahrenheit, 23.4 degrees Celsius, in August. The city receives 49.9 inches, 1,270 millimeters, of precipitation annually, which is relatively evenly spread throughout the year. Average winter snowfall between 1981 and 2010 has been 25.8 inches, 66 centimeters. This varies considerably between years. Hurricanes and tropical storms are rare in the New York area. Hurricane Sandy brought a destructive storm surge to New York City on the evening of October 29, 2012, flooding numerous streets, tunnels, and subway lines in Lower Manhattan and other areas of the city and cutting off electricity in many parts of the city and its suburbs. The storm and its profound impacts have prompted the discussion of constructing seawalls and other coastal barriers around the shorelines of the city and the metropolitan area to minimize the risk of destructive consequences from another such event in the future. The warmest month on record is July 1999, with a mean temperature of 81.4 degrees Fahrenheit, 27.4 degrees Celsius. The coldest month was February 1934, with a mean temperature of 19.9 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 6.7 degrees Celsius. The warmest year on record is 2012, with a mean temperature of 57.4 degrees Fahrenheit, 14.1 degrees Celsius. The coldest year was 1888, with a mean temperature of 49.3 degrees Fahrenheit, 9.6 degrees Celsius. The driest month on record is June 1949, with 0.02 inches, 0.51 millimeters, of rainfall. The wettest month was August 2011, with 18.95 inches, 481 millimeters, of rainfall. The driest year on record is 1965, with 26.09 inches, 663 millimeters, of rainfall. The wettest year was 1983, with 80.56 inches, 2,046 millimeters, of rainfall. The snowiest month on record is February 2010, with 36.9 inches, 94 centimeters, of snowfall. The snowiest season, July to June, on record is 1995 to 1996, with 75.6 inches, 192 centimeters, of snowfall. The least snowy season was 1972 to 1973, with 2.3 inches, 5.8 centimeters, of snowfall. See or edit raw graph data. Parks. The City of New York has a complex park system, with various lands operated by the National Park Service, the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, and the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation. In its 2018 Park Score ranking, the Trust for Public Land reported that the park system in New York City was the 9th best park system among the 50 most populous U.S. cities. Park Score ranks urban park systems by a formula that analyzes median park size, park acres as percent of city area, the percent of city residents within a half-mile of a park, spending of park services per resident, and the number of playgrounds per 10,000 residents. National Parks. Gateway National Recreation Area contains over 26,000 acres, 521.83 hectares, in total, most of it surrounded by New York City, including the Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge. In Brooklyn and Queens, the park contains over 9,000 acres, 36 square kilometers, of salt marsh, wetlands, islands, and water, including most of Jamaica Bay. Also in Queens, the park includes a significant portion of the Western Rockaway Peninsula, most notably Jacob Riis Park and Fort Tilden. In Staten Island, Gateway National Recreation Area includes Fort Wadsworth, with historic pre-Civil War era Battery Weed and Fort Tompkins, and Great Kills Park, with beaches, trails, and a marina. The Statue of Liberty National Monument and Ellis Island Immigration Museum are managed by the National Park Service and are in both the states of New York and New Jersey. They are joined in the harbor by Governor's Island National Monument, in New York. Historic sites under federal management on Manhattan Island include Castle Clinton National Monument, Federal Hall National Memorial, Theodore Roosevelt Birthplace National Historic Site, General Grant National Memorial, Grant's Tomb, African Burial Ground National Monument, and Hamilton Grange National Memorial. Hundreds of private properties are listed on the National Register of Historic Places or as a National Historic Landmark, such as, for example, the Stonewall Inn, part of the Stonewall National Monument in Greenwich Village, as the catalyst of the modern gay rights movement. State Parks. There are 7 state parks within the confines of New York City, including Clay Pit Bond State Park Preserve, a natural area that includes extensive riding trails, and Riverbank State Park, a 28-acre, 11 hectares, facility that rises 69 feet, 21 meters, over the Hudson River. City Parks. New York City has over 28,000 acres, 110 square kilometers, of municipal parkland and 14 miles, 23 kilometers, of public beaches. The largest municipal park in the city is Pelham Bay Park in the Bronx, with 2,772 acres, 1,122 hectares. Central Park, an 843-acre, 3.41 square kilometers, park in Middle Upper Manhattan, is the most visited urban park in the United States and one of the most filmed locations in the world, with 40 million visitors in 2013. The park contains a wide range of attractions. There are several lakes and ponds, 2 ice skating rinks, the Central Park Zoo, the Central Park Conservatory Garden, and the 106-acre, 0.43 square kilometers, Jackie Onassis Reservoir. Indoor attractions include Belvedere Castle with its nature center, the Swedish Cottage Marionette Theater, and the historic Carousel. On October 23, 2012, hedge fund manager John A. Paulson announced a $100 million gift to the Central Park Conservancy, the largest ever monetary donation to New York City's park system. Washington Square Park is a prominent landmark in the Greenwich Village neighborhood of Lower Manhattan. The Washington Square Arch at the northern gateway to the park is an iconic symbol of both New York University and Greenwich Village. Prospect Park in Brooklyn has a 90-acre, 36 hectares, meadow, a lake, and extensive woodlands. Within the park is the historic Battle Pass, prominent in the Battle of Long Island. Flushing Meadows Corona Park in Queens, with its 897 acres, 363 hectares, making it the city's 4th largest park, was the setting for the 1939 World's Fair and the 1964 World's Fair and is host to the USTA Billie Jean King National Tennis Center and the annual United States Open Tennis Championships tournament. Over a fifth of the Bronx's area, 7,000 acres, 28 square kilometers, is given over to open space and parks, including Pelham Bay Park, Ben Cortlandt Park, the Bronx Zoo, and the New York Botanical Gardens. In Staten Island, the Conference House Park contains the historic Conference House, site of the only attempt of a peaceful resolution to the American Revolution, which was conducted in September 1775, attended by Benjamin Franklin representing the Americans and Lord Howe representing the British Crown. The historic Burial Ridge, the largest Native American burial ground within New York City, is within the park. Military installations. New York City is home to Fort Hamilton, the U.S. military's only active duty installation within the city. The Brooklyn facility was established in 1825 on the site of a small battery utilized during the American Revolution, and it is one of America's longest-serving military forts. Today Fort Hamilton serves as the headquarters of the North Atlantic Division of the United States Army Corps of Engineers and for the New York City Recruiting Battalion. It also houses the 1179th Transportation Brigade, the 722nd Aeromedical Staging Squadron, and a military entrance processing station. Other formerly active military reservations still utilized for National Guard and military training or reserve operations in the city include Fort Wadsworth in Staten Island and Fort Taunton in Queens. Demographics. New York City is the most populous city in the United States, with an estimated 8,398,748 residents as of July 2018. Incorporating more immigration into the city than outmigration since the 2010 United States Census. More than twice as many people live in New York City as compared to Los Angeles, the second most populous U.S. city, and within a smaller area. New York City gained more residents between April 2010 and July 2014, 316,000, than any other U.S. city. New York City's population is about 43% of New York State's population and about 36% of the population of the New York metropolitan area. Population density. In 2017, the city had an estimated population density of 28,491 inhabitants per square mile, 11,000/km2. Rendering it the most densely populated of all municipalities housing over 100,000 residents in the United States, with several small cities, of fewer than 100,000, in adjacent Hudson County, New Jersey having greater density, as per the 2010 census. Geographically coextensive with New York County, the borough of Manhattan's 2017 population density of 72,918 inhabitants per square mile, 28,154/km2, makes it the highest of any county in the United States and higher than the density of any individual American city. Race and ethnicity. The city's population in 2010 was 44% white, 33.3% non-Hispanic white, 25.5% black, 23% non-Hispanic black, 0.7% Native American, and 12.7% Asian. Hispanics of any race represented 28.6% of the population, while Asians constituted the fastest growing segment of the city's population between 2000 and 2010. The non-Hispanic white population declined 3%, the smallest recorded decline in decades, and for the first time since the Civil War, the number of blacks declined over a decade. Throughout its history, New York has been a major port of entry for immigrants into the United States. More than 12 million European immigrants were received at Ellis Island between 1892 and 1924. The term melting pot was first coined to describe densely populated immigrant neighborhoods on the Lower East Side. By 1900, Germans constituted the largest immigrant group, followed by the Irish, Jews, and Italians. In 1940, whites represented 92% of the city's population. Approximately 37% of the city's population is foreign-born, and more than half of all children are born to mothers who are immigrants. In New York, no single country or region of origin dominates. The 10 largest sources of foreign-born individuals in the city as of 2011 were the Dominican Republic, China, Mexico, Guyana, Jamaica, Ecuador, Haiti, India, Russia, and Trinidad and Tobago, while the Bangladeshi-born immigrant population has become one of the fastest growing in the city, counting over 74,000 by 2011. Asian Americans in New York City, according to the 2010 census, number more than 1 million, greater than the combined totals of San Francisco and Los Angeles. New York contains the highest total Asian population of any U.S. city proper. The New York City borough of Queens is home to the state's largest Asian American population and the largest Andean, Colombian, Ecuadorian, Peruvian, and Bolivian populations in the United States, and is also the most ethnically diverse urban area in the world. The Chinese population constitutes the fastest growing nationality in New York State. Multiple satellites of the original Manhattan Chinatown, in Brooklyn, and around Flushing, Queens, are thriving as traditionally urban enclaves, while also expanding rapidly eastward into suburban Nassau County on Long Island, as the New York metropolitan region and New York State have become the top destinations for new Chinese immigrants, respectively, and large-scale Chinese immigration continues into New York City and surrounding areas, with the largest metropolitan Chinese diaspora outside Asia, including an estimated 812,410 individuals in 2015. In 2012, 6.3% of New York City was of Chinese ethnicity, with nearly 3/4 living in either Queens or Brooklyn, geographically on Long Island. A community numbering 20,000 Korean Chinese, Gyeokseonsu or Joseonjak, is centered in Flushing, Queens, while New York City is also home to the largest Tibetan population outside China, India, and Nepal, also centered in Queens. Koreans made up 1.2% of the city's population, and Japanese 0.3%. Filipinos were the largest Southeast Asian ethnic group at 0.8%, followed by Vietnamese, who made up 0.2% of New York City's population in 2010. Indians are the largest South Asian group, comprising 2.4% of the city's population, with Bangladeshis and Pakistanis at 0.7% and 0.5%, respectively. Queens is the preferred borough of settlement for Asian Indians, Koreans, Filipinos, and Malaysians and other Southeast Asians, while Brooklyn is receiving large numbers of both West Indian and Asian Indian immigrants. New York City has the largest European and non-Hispanic white population of any American city. At 2.7 million in 2012, New York's non-Hispanic white population is larger than the non-Hispanic white populations of Los Angeles, 1.1 million, Chicago, 865,000, and Houston, 550,000, combined. The non-Hispanic white population was 6.6 million in 1940. The non-Hispanic white population has begun to increase since 2010. The European diaspora residing in the city is very diverse. According to 2012 census estimates, there were roughly 560,000 Italian Americans, 385,000 Irish Americans, 253,000 German Americans, 223,000 Russian Americans, 201,000 Polish Americans, and 137,000 English Americans. Additionally, Greek and French Americans numbered 65,000 each, with those of Hungarian descent estimated at 60,000 people. Ukrainian and Scottish Americans numbered 55,000 and 35,000, respectively. People identifying ancestry from Spain numbered 30,838 total in 2010. People of Norwegian and Swedish descent both stood at about 20,000 each, while people of Czech, Lithuanian, Portuguese, Scotch-Irish, and Welsh descent all numbered between 12,000 to 14,000 people. Arab Americans number over 160,000 in New York City, with the highest concentration in Brooklyn. Central Asians, primarily Uzbek Americans, are a rapidly growing segment of the city's non-Hispanic white population, enumerating over 30,000, and including over half of all Central Asian immigrants to the United States, most settling in Queens or Brooklyn. Albanian Americans are most highly concentrated in the Bronx. The wider New York City metropolitan statistical area, with over 20 million people, about 50% greater than the second plaque,